Why your mind won't stop. Why your mind won't stop. Your mind isn't quiet, even when everything around you is still. Your thoughts keep moving. One thought turns into another, then 10 more. You replay something you said earlier. Then you imagine what you should have said. Then you start wondering what they think about you now. And before you realize it, you're stuck. Inside your own head, you felt this. Lying in bed at night, tired, but unable to switch off. Your body wants rest, but your mind won't stop. It keeps asking questions. What if I said the wrong thing? What if something goes wrong tomorrow? What if I made a mistake? And even when you know it doesn't make sense, you still feel it. The tension, the anxiety, the mental noise. And that's the part that confuses you the most. Because you're aware. You know you're overthinking, but you still can't stop. So you try. You try to control your thoughts. Push them away. Replace them. Ignore them. Distract yourself. But somehow they keep coming back. Stronger, louder, more convincing. And eventually you start asking, why is my mind like this? Why can't I just think normally? Why can't I just relax? But here's the truth. Your mind is not broken. It's overprotective. It's trying to solve problems that don't need solving. It's trying to create certainty in situations where certainty doesn't exist. And the more it tries, the more it traps you. Because overthinking feels like control, but it creates the opposite. You feel stuck, exhausted, mentally drained, trapped in loops that don't lead anywhere. And here's what most people don't realize. The problem is not that you have too many thoughts. The problem is you believe too many of them. Every thought feels important. Every thought feels like something you need to figure out. Every thought feels like it deserves your attention. But it doesn't, because not every thought is true. Not every thought is useful, and not every thought needs a response. But your mind doesn't know that yet. So it keeps going, loop after loop, question after question, trying to protect you while overwhelming you at the same time. And this is where everything starts to change. Because you don't need to fight your mind. You don't need to silence every thought. You don't need to become perfectly calm. You need to understand what's happening. Because once you understand your mind, you stop fearing it. And once you stop fearing it, you stop feeding it. And when that happens, the noise begins to settle. Not instantly, but gradually, naturally. And for the first time, you start to feel something different. Space, clarity, calm. Not because your thoughts disappeared, but because they no longer control you. So if your mind feels loud, if your thoughts feel overwhelming, if you feel like you're trapped inside your own thinking, this is for you. Because you don't need to fix your mind. You need to change your relationship with it. And that's exactly what you're about to learn. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why your mind won't stop. Why your mind won't stop. It starts small. A single thought. Something simple. Maybe even harmless. Did I say something wrong? And then another thought follows. What if they took it the wrong way? Then another. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And before you realize it, you're deep inside it. Replaying. Analyzing. Trying to figure it out. You felt this, a moment that should have passed, but didn't. Your mind held on to it, turned it over, looked at it from every angle, trying to find certainty, trying to feel in control. But instead, you feel more anxious, more unsure, more stuck. And that's the confusing part, because it feels like you're doing something useful. It feels like you're solving a problem, thinking it through, being careful, but you're not moving forward. You're going in circles. Now here's the truth most people don't realize. Your mind doesn't overthink because something is wrong with you. It overthinks because it's trying to protect you from uncertainty, from mistakes, from pain. Your brain is wired for this. It wants answers. It wants clarity. It wants to predict what might happen so you can avoid what could go wrong. And when it doesn't have those answers, it keeps searching through thoughts over and over again. Now imagine this. You send a message to someone, simple, normal. And then, no reply. Minutes pass, then more. And suddenly, your mind starts filling the silence. They're ignoring me. I said something wrong. They're upset. I shouldn't have sent that. None of these are facts, but they feel real. Because your mind is trying to reduce uncertainty. It's trying to explain the unknown. But instead of giving you clarity, it creates anxiety. Because the more you think, the more possibilities you create. And not all of them are helpful. Now here's the key question. Are you solving a real problem or trying to control uncertainty? Because those are not the same. A real problem has a clear action, something you can do, something you can change. But uncertainty has no clear answer, no immediate solution. So your mind keeps searching, Keeps looping, keeps asking, what if? And what if has no end. That's why it feels exhausting, because you're trying to solve something that cannot be solved through thinking alone. Now here's something important. Overthinking often feels responsible, like you're being careful, prepared, aware. But in reality, it keeps you stuck. It delays action. It increases anxiety. It drains your energy. Because instead of moving forward, you stay inside the loop. Now pause for a moment. Think about something you've been overthinking recently, a conversation, a decision, a situation. Ask yourself, is there something I can actually do right now? If the answer is yes, that's a real problem. Take one small step. If the answer is no, then you're dealing with uncertainty. And more thinking won't solve it. That's the shift. Not stopping thoughts completely, but recognizing what they are. Because once you see the difference, you stop chasing every thought. You stop treating every idea like something that needs to be solved. And that's where space begins. Not silence, but space between you and your thoughts. Now here's the deeper truth. Your mind won't stop thinking. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop getting pulled into every thought it creates. Because once you stop engaging with every thought, they lose their power, slowly, naturally, without force. And that's when things begin to feel different. Less overwhelming, less intense, more manageable. Now, if this is starting to make sense, if you're beginning to see that your mind is not broken, but simply overprotective, stay with this. Because what you're about to understand next is one of the most important shifts you can make. Not all thoughts are meant to be followed, and some of them should never be treated like instructions. Intrusive thoughts are not instructions. Chapter 2. Intrusive thoughts are not instructions. The thought came out of nowhere. You weren't trying to think it. You didn't want it, but it showed up anyway. And the moment it did, everything shifted. Your body tensed, your mind locked onto it, and suddenly, it felt important. Dangerous. Like something you needed to figure out immediately. You felt this, a thought that feels disturbing, uncomfortable, out of character. Something like, what if something goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I did something terrible? Or even worse, a thought that doesn't feel like you at all. And the moment it appears, you react. Not to the situation, but to the thought itself. You question it, analyze it, try to understand why it showed up. And most importantly, you try to get rid of it. But the more you try, the stronger it feels. And now you're stuck, not in reality, but in your reaction to a thought. Now here's the truth most people don't understand. Intrusive thoughts are not rare. They're not abnormal, and they don't mean anything about who you are. They're just thoughts. Uninvited, unfiltered, automatic. But the problem is not the thought itself. The problem is how seriously you take it. Because the moment you treat a thought like a threat, your brain responds with fear, with urgency, with attention. And that attention gives the thought power. Now imagine this. You're walking down the street and a random thought appears. What if I trip right now? It's just a thought, but if you ignore it, it passes. But if you focus on it, question it, start imagining it, suddenly it feels real. Important, like something you need to control. That's how intrusive thoughts work. Not because they're true, but because they trigger a reaction. Now here's the shift. A thought is not a command, it's a mental event. Something your brain produces, not something you have to follow, not something you have to solve. Not something you have to believe, but right now, your mind treats thoughts differently. It treats them like signals, warnings, predictions, and that's why they feel so powerful. Now, let's make this real. You think, what if I fail? And instantly, your body reacts. Your mind starts building scenarios. You feel anxious, and suddenly it feels like failure is likely. But ask yourself, did anything actually happen? Or did a thought create the feeling? Because that's the difference. The thought came first, the feeling followed, not the other way around. Now here's something important. Trying to eliminate intrusive thoughts doesn't work because your brain produces thoughts constantly. Some helpful, some neutral, some random, some uncomfortable. You don't get to choose what shows up, but you do get to choose how you respond. And that's where your power is, not in controlling the thought, but in changing your relationship with it. Now here's a simple shift. Instead of saying, I'm going to fail, you say, I'm having the thought that I might fail. It sounds small, but it changes everything. Because now you're not inside the thought, you're observing it. There's space, distance, clarity, and that space reduces the intensity, not instantly, but noticeably, because you're no longer treating the thought as truth. You're seeing it as what it is, just a thought. Now pause for a moment. Think about a recent thought that bothered you. Something that kept repeating. Now say it differently. I am having the thought that. Notice what changes, even slightly. That's the beginning of separation. And that separation is what weakens the loop. Now here's the deeper truth. Intrusive thoughts don't stay because they're powerful. They stay because you engage with them. You analyze, you resist, you react. And that keeps the loop alive. But when you stop feeding the thought, it begins to lose energy. Not because you forced it away, but because you didn't give it attention. And over time, that changes everything. Now, if this is starting to click, if you're beginning to see that thoughts are not instructions, but mental events, stay with this. Because what you're about to understand next is how these thoughts turn into loops, and why once they start, they feel so hard to stop. Chapter 3. The overthinking loop. It doesn't feel like a loop when you're inside it. It feels like thinking, normal thinking, trying to figure something out, trying to get clarity, trying to feel better. But if you look closely, it follows the same pattern. Every time you've experienced this, something small happens. A message, a comment, a moment, and it triggers a thought. What did they mean by that? That thought creates a feeling, slight tension, uncertainty, anxiety, and your mind reacts. It tries to solve it. So you think more. You replay the situation. You analyze what was said. You imagine different outcomes. You try to find the answer. And for a moment, you feel a bit of relief, like you're getting closer, like you're understanding it. But then another thought appears. What if that's not it? And just like that, you're back in it, thinking again, searching again, looping again. This is the overthinking loop. And once it starts, it feeds itself. Now let's break it down clearly. The loop, trigger, thought, anxiety, more thinking, temporary relief, repeat. That's it, simple, but powerful, because each part strengthens the next. The trigger creates the thought creates the feeling pushes you to think more, and the thinking gives you just enough relief to keep going. Now here's the part most people don't see. The relief is the trap, because it teaches your brain. Thinking works. Keep doing it, even though it doesn't solve anything long term. It just keeps the loop alive. Now think about this. Have you ever replayed a conversation over and over, trying to find the right interpretation, trying to understand what they really meant? Each time you think about it, you feel like you're getting somewhere, but hours later, you're still thinking, still unsure, still stuck. That's the loop. Or maybe this feels familiar. You check your phone, no message. You check again, still nothing. So you think, maybe they're busy. Then, or maybe they're ignoring me. Then, did I say something wrong? Now your anxiety increases. So what do? You check again. You reread the conversation. You try to figure it out. That's the loop. Now here's the truth. Overthinking doesn't come from too many thoughts. It comes from engaging with the same thoughts over and over again. It's repetition, not volume. Now here's the shift. You don't break the loop by finding the perfect answer. You break the loop by recognizing it. Because once you can say, this is a loop, something changes. You step out of it, even slightly. Now, instead of being inside the thinking, you're observing it. And that creates space. Now here's a simple practice. The moment you notice yourself replaying, analyzing, checking, seeking reassurance, pause and say, this is an overthinking loop, not a solution. That's it. You don't need to fix it immediately. You don't need to force it to stop. You just need to see it clearly, because awareness interrupts the pattern. Now here's something important. Your brain doesn't like stopping. It will try to pull you back in. It will say, just think a little more. You're close to figuring it out. Don't stop now. But that's the loop talking, not reality. Because if thinking solved it, you would already feel better. But you don't. You feel more stuck, more tired, more overwhelmed. Now pause for a moment. Think about a loop you've been in recently. What triggered it? What thought started it? How did it make you feel? And what did you do next? Because once you see the pattern, you start recognizing it faster, earlier, before it fully takes over. And that's where change begins. Not at the end of the loop, but at the beginning. Now here's the deeper truth. You don't need to stop thinking completely. That's not realistic. You just need to stop feeding the loop, because without engagement, the loop loses energy, naturally, over time. And that's when your mind starts to feel different. Less trapped, less repetitive, more open. Now, if this is starting to make sense, if you're beginning to see that overthinking is not random, but patterned, stay with this. Because what you're about to understand next is why trying to fight these thoughts actually makes them stronger. Chapter 4. Why fighting thoughts makes them louder. You tried to stop it. You felt the thought coming and immediately pushed back. No, not this again. Stop thinking about it. Just calm down. You tried to force it away, distract yourself, replace it with something positive. Ignore it completely. But instead of disappearing, it came back stronger, louder, more persistent. You felt this. The harder you try not to think about something, the more it shows up, not less, more. And that's the part that feels frustrating, because you're trying to fix it. But it feels like you're making it worse. And in a way, you are. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because of how the mind works. Now imagine this. I tell you, don't think about a white bear. Just for a moment. Try not to. Immediately, your mind creates the image. You see it, even though you were trying not to. That's how thought suppression works. The moment you try to push a thought away, your brain has to check if it's still there. And in doing that, it brings the thought back. Over and over again. Now apply that to overthinking. You have a thought. What if something goes wrong? You don't like it. So you try to get rid of it. Stop thinking about that. But your brain checks, am I still thinking about it? And just like that, the thought returns, stronger, because now it has attention. Now it feels important. Now it feels like something that needs to be controlled. That's the trap. The more you fight a thought, the more you feed it, not because you want to, but because attention strengthens it. Now here's the shift. Peace doesn't come from eliminating thoughts. It comes from changing your relationship with them, because you don't control what shows up, but you can control how you respond. Now imagine a different approach. A thought appears. What if I fail? Instead of reacting, you notice it. You don't argue with it. You don't push it away. You don't try to solve it. You simply recognize that's a thought and you let it be there, without engaging, without feeding it. At first, this feels uncomfortable, because your mind wants to react. It wants to fix it. But over time, something changes. The thought loses intensity. Not because you removed it, but because you didn't give it energy. Now here's where this becomes powerful. Thoughts are like waves. They rise, peak, and fall, naturally. But when you fight them, you interrupt that process. You hold them in place. You keep them active. Now imagine standing in the ocean. A wave comes toward you. If you resist it, it hits you harder. But if you allow it to pass, it moves through you. That's how thoughts work. Now here's a simple practice. When a thought shows up, instead of reacting, mentally step back and say, I notice I'm having this thought. That's it. You're not trying to remove it. You're creating distance. You're stepping out of the loop. Now another technique. Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating on a stream. Each thought appears and drifts by. You don't grab it. You don't analyze it. You don't push it away. You just watch it pass. Some move quickly, some linger, but all of them eventually move. That's the natural process. And when you stop interfering, your mind begins to settle. Not instantly, but gradually. Now here's something important. Letting thoughts exist does not mean you agree with them. It does not mean they're true. It just means you're not giving them control. Because control doesn't come from force. It comes from non-engagement. Now pause for a moment. Think about a thought you've been fighting. Something you've been trying to get rid of. What happens if, instead of pushing it away, you let it be there? Without reacting, without solving, without chasing. Just for a moment, that's where the shift begins. Not in forcing your mind to be quiet, but in allowing it to settle. Now here's the deeper truth. Your mind doesn't need to be controlled. It needs to feel safe. And when you stop fighting every thought, you signal to your brain, there is no threat here. And slowly, the urgency fades, the noise softens, the loops weaken. Now, if this is starting to click, if you're beginning to see why trying to control your thoughts keeps you stuck, stay with this. Because what you're about to understand next is what drives this entire process, the need for certainty, and why your mind keeps searching for answers that don't always exist. Chapter 5. Anxiety and the need for certainty. You just want to be sure, that's it. You're not trying to overthink. You're not trying to stress yourself out. You just want clarity. You want to know, did I do the right thing? Is everything okay? What's going to happen next? And that feels reasonable, normal, responsible even. But here's where it turns. Because sometimes there is no clear answer, and your mind doesn't like that at all. So it starts searching through thoughts, through scenarios, through possibilities, trying to find certainty, trying to eliminate doubt. But instead of finding peace, you find more questions, more uncertainty, more anxiety. You felt this, you make a decision, then immediately wonder, was that the right choice? You replay it. You imagine different outcomes. You try to predict what might happen next, because if you can just figure it out, you'll feel better, right? But you don't. You feel worse, more unsure, more stuck, because certainty is not something your mind can always give you. And that's the trap. Now here's the truth most people don't realize. Anxiety is not just fear. It's the need for certainty in an uncertain world. Your mind wants guarantees, clear answers, predictable outcomes. But life doesn't work that way. People don't work that way. The future doesn't work that way. So your mind keeps searching for something that doesn't exist. And the more it searches, the more anxious you feel. Now imagine this. You send a message, no reply. Your mind immediately asks, what does that mean? And because there's no answer, it creates one. They're ignoring me. They're upset. I did something wrong. None of these are facts. They're guesses, but your mind treats them like possibilities that need solving. So it keeps going, trying to eliminate uncertainty, trying to feel safe, but instead, it creates more tension. Now here's the shift. You don't need to eliminate uncertainty to feel calm. You need to learn how to tolerate it, because uncertainty is not the problem. Your resistance to it is. Now this might feel uncomfortable, because your mind has been trained to believe certainty equals safety. But real calm comes from something different. It comes from being able to say, I don't know, and that's okay. Not because you don't care, but because you understand, not everything needs to be figured out right now. Now here's something powerful. Every time you chase certainty through thinking, you strengthen anxiety because you teach your brain. Uncertainty is dangerous. Keep solving, keep thinking. But every time you allow uncertainty to exist without reacting, you weaken that pattern because you show your brain, this is uncomfortable but not harmful. And that changes everything. Now let's make this practical. The next time your mind asks, what if something goes wrong? Instead of answering, try this. Say, maybe it will, maybe it won't. And leave it there. No analysis, no solving, no chasing, just acceptance. At first, this feels incomplete, unfinished, because your mind wants closure. But over time, this creates space because you're no longer feeding the need for certainty. Now pause for a moment. Think about something you're currently unsure about. A situation, a decision, a relationship. Notice how your mind wants to solve it, figure it out, control it. Now ask yourself, is there a clear answer right now? If the answer is no, then more thinking won't help. Only acceptance will. Now here's the deeper truth. Peace doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from being okay with not knowing, and that's a skill. Not something you're born with, something you build over time, with practice. Now, if this is starting to make sense, if you're beginning to see how your need for certainty drives your overthinking, stay with this, because what you're about to understand next is where this shows up the most, not in random thoughts, but in something much more personal, your relationships. Chapter 6. How to stop overthinking relationships. This is where it hits the hardest. Not random thoughts, not abstract worries, but people, what they said, what they meant, what they might be thinking. You felt this, a message that felt slightly off, a reply that was shorter than usual, a tone that didn't sit right, and suddenly, your mind locks in. What did that mean? Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? And just like that, the loop begins. You replay the conversation. You reread messages. You analyze every word, every pause, every detail, trying to understand something that isn't clear. And the more you think, the less clear it becomes. Now here's the truth. Overthinking in relationships is rarely about the other person. It's about uncertainty and what that uncertainty makes you feel. Because when you don't know where you stand, your mind tries to figure it out quickly, completely, so you can feel safe again. But instead of clarity, you create stories. They're losing interest. They're judging me. They don't care. And those stories feel real, not because they're true, but because you've repeated them enough. Now here's where it gets deeper. You're not just reacting to the moment. You're reacting to what it might mean about you, about the relationship, about your place in it. And that's why it feels so intense, because it's personal. Now imagine this. Someone takes longer than usual to reply. That's the fact, but your mind turns it into, they're ignoring me. I said something wrong. They don't value me. Now your feeling changes, not because of what happened, but because of what you made it mean. And that meaning is what drives the anxiety. Now here's the shift. You separate what happened from what you're telling yourself about it, because those are not the same. Now let's make this simple. Fact. They replied late. Story. They don't care about me. One is real. One is interpretation, and most of your overthinking lives in the interpretation. Now here's something important. Your mind is trying to protect you from rejection, from embarrassment, from emotional pain. So it scans for signals, looks for meaning, tries to predict outcomes, but in doing that, it creates pressure. It turns small moments into big conclusions, and that's where the loop begins. Now here's the mistake most people make. They try to think their way to certainty. They try to figure out the other person, understand every detail, decode every message. But people are not puzzles, and relationships are not solved through thinking. They are experienced, felt, communicated. Now here's the shift. You don't stop overthinking relationships by analyzing more. You stop by stepping out of the story and coming back to what's real. Now try this. The next time your mind starts building a story, pause and ask, what do I actually know right now? Not what you assume. Not what you fear, what you know. That alone reduces the intensity because it brings you back to reality. Now another shift. Instead of asking, what are they thinking? Ask, what am I feeling right now? Because your anxiety is not coming from them. It's coming from your reaction. And when you focus on that, you regain control. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to solve every uncertainty in a relationship. You need to tolerate not knowing, because clarity in relationships doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from time, from communication, from reality unfolding, not from mental loops. Now pause for a moment. Think about a situation you've been overthinking. What are the facts? What are the stories? Separate them, even slightly. That's where clarity begins. Now here's the deeper truth. Overthinking relationships comes from caring, from wanting connection, from wanting things to be okay. But caring doesn't require overanalyzing. Connection doesn't require constant thinking. And peace doesn't come from figuring everything out. It comes from letting things be without forcing meaning onto them. Now if this is starting to click, if you're beginning to see how your mind creates stories and then reacts to them, stay with this, because what you're about to learn next is something you can use immediately. In the moment, when your mind is racing, when your thoughts feel overwhelming, when you need calm, right now. Chapter 7. How to calm a racing mind in the moment. It hits fast. One thought, then 10 more. Your chest tightens, your mind speeds up, and suddenly you feel overwhelmed. Not later, not gradually. Right now, you've felt this. In the middle of the day, in a conversation, or late at night, when everything is quiet, except your mind, and in that moment you don't need theory, you don't need explanation, you need relief. Now, so you try to stop it. You tell yourself, calm down, stop thinking, relax, but nothing changes, because the problem is not that your mind is thinking. The problem is that your body feels like something is wrong, and when your body feels unsafe, your mind speeds up, not to hurt you, but to protect you. Now here's the shift. You don't calm the mind by fighting the thoughts. You calm the mind by calming the body, because the body leads. The mind follows. So instead of trying to stop thinking, you start here. 1. Slow the body first. Right now, take a slow breath in, not forced, just slower than usual. Hold it for a moment, then exhale, even slower. Do it again and again. This isn't about breathing perfectly. It's about signaling safety. Because when your breath slows, your nervous system begins to settle, and when your body settles, your thoughts lose intensity, not instantly, but noticeably. 2. Ground yourself in reality. When your mind is racing, it's usually in the future. What if? What could happen? What might go wrong? So you bring it back to now. Look around. Notice something simple. The feeling of your hands, the surface you're sitting on, the sounds around you. Not deeply, just lightly. This pulls your attention out of your thoughts and back into reality, because right now, in this exact moment, you are okay. 3. Name what's happening. Instead of getting lost in the feeling, label it quietly in your mind. This is anxiety. This is a racing mind. This is a stress response. That's it. No judgment, no resistance, just recognition. Because when you name it, you create distance from it. You are no longer inside it. You're observing it. 4. Stop trying to solve it. This is the hardest part, because your mind wants to fix everything immediately. But in a heightened state, you won't find clarity. You'll only find more noise. So instead of solving, you pause. You tell yourself, I don't need to figure this out right now. And you mean it, because you don't, not in this moment. Clarity comes later. Calm comes first. 5. Let the wave pass. Remember this. What you're feeling is temporary. It rises, it peaks, and it falls. Even if it doesn't feel like it, even if it feels endless. It's not. But if you fight it, you stretch it. If you feed it, you extend it. If you allow it, it passes. Now pause for a moment. Think about the last time your mind felt overwhelmed. Did it last forever? Or did it eventually fade? It always fades, and this moment is no different. Now here's the deeper truth. You don't need to eliminate anxiety to feel in control. You need to know how to move through it, because when you stop fearing the moment loses its power. Now here's your anchor. Whenever your mind starts racing, remember this. Slow the body. Return to the present. Name the feeling. Stop solving. Let it pass. Simple. Not easy at first, but powerful. Now, if this is starting to help, if you're beginning to feel that shift, even slightly, stay with this, because what you're about to understand next goes even deeper. Mental clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less. Chapter 8. Mental clarity comes from less chasing. You've been trying to fix your mind by doing more. More thinking, more analyzing, more figuring things out, more trying to get to the bottom of things. And it makes sense, because it feels productive, like you're working toward clarity. But if you're honest, it doesn't feel clearer. It feels heavier, more crowded, more overwhelming. Because here's the truth. Mental clarity doesn't come from chasing thoughts. It comes from stepping away from them. You've felt this before. A moment where you stopped thinking, not on purpose, but because you were distracted. Maybe you were walking, listening to music, watching something, or just doing nothing, and for a brief moment, your mind felt lighter, quieter, more open. That wasn't because you solved everything. It was because you stopped chasing. Now, here's the pattern most people don't see. The more you chase a thought, the more it expands. The more attention you give it, the more space it takes up, until eventually it fills your entire mind. And now it feels like, this is important, I need to figure this out. But that feeling is created by attention, not importance. Now imagine this. A thought appears. What if I made the wrong decision? You grab it, you start analyzing, comparing, replaying, trying to find certainty. And the more you think, the more possibilities appear. Now instead of one thought, you have 10, then 20. And now your mind feels full. Not because the problem got bigger, but because you kept feeding it. Now here's the shift. You don't need to resolve every thought. You need to stop chasing every thought, because not every thought deserves your attention. And attention is your most powerful resource. Now this might feel uncomfortable, because your mind will say, but what if this matters? What if I'm ignoring something important? That's the fear, that if you stop thinking, you'll lose control. But the opposite is true. The more you chase thoughts, the less control you feel. Now here's something simple. Clarity is not something you create. It's something that appears when the noise settles, like water. If you keep stirring it, it stays cloudy. But if you leave it alone, it clears. Naturally, without effort. Your mind works the same way. Now here's a practical shift. The next time a thought appears, instead of following it, notice it and return to what you were doing. Not forcefully, not aggressively, just gently, over and over, because each time you do that, you're training your mind. You're teaching it, not every thought needs my attention. And over time, this changes everything. Now pause for a moment. Think about how much energy you've spent trying to figure everything out. Every situation, every possibility, every what if, and ask yourself, did it bring me clarity or more noise? Because that answer shows you the truth. Now here's the deeper truth. Mental clarity is not about having no thoughts. It's about having space between them. Space to breathe, space to choose, space to not react. And that space comes from letting go, not holding on. Now here's the shift. You don't need to chase peace. You need to stop chasing everything else, because peace is already there, underneath the noise, waiting, not forced, not created, just uncovered. Now, if this is starting to click, if you're beginning to feel that shift, even slightly, stay with this, because what you're about to understand next is how to build this clarity, not just in moments, but every single day. Chapter 9. Build a quiet mind daily. You don't find a quiet mind. You build one. Slowly, daily, through small shifts that most people ignore. Because here's what happens. You listen to something like this. It makes sense. You feel calm, clear, like something clicked. But then life happens. You get busy. Something triggers you, and your mind goes right back to overthinking, not because you failed, but because you didn't train it. And this is the difference. Understanding helps, but repetition changes you. Now here's the truth. A quiet mind is not created in one moment. It's created in how you live every day, in the small moments, in the habits you repeat, in how you respond again and again. So now we make this real, not theory, practice. 1. Reduce mental input. Your mind is not just reacting. It's processing everything you feed it. Social media, messages, information, opinions, noise, constantly. And the more input you take in, the more your mind has to process. Which means more thoughts, more noise, more loops. Now here's the shift. You don't need to cut everything out, but you need to be intentional. Less scrolling, less constant stimulation. More space, because silence gives your mind room to settle. 2. Create small moments of stillness, not long sessions, not perfect routines, just small pauses throughout your day, 30 seconds where you do nothing, no phone, no thinking, just pause. At first, this feels uncomfortable because your mind will try to fill the space, but over time, those moments become easier and your baseline begins to shift. Less noise, more calm. 3. Stop feeding every thought. You already know this, but now you practice it. A thought appears. Instead of chasing it, you let it pass. Again, and again, and again, not perfectly, but consistently. Because every time you don't engage, you weaken the habit of overthinking. 4. Accept that some days will be loud. This is important because most people expect, if I do this, my mind should always be calm, but that's not how it works. Some days will feel heavy. Some days your mind will race. That doesn't mean you're back at the beginning. It means you're human. The difference now is you don't panic when it happens. You don't react the same way. You let it pass faster, with less resistance. 5. Return to the present often. Your mind lives in the past, the future, the what if. But your life is happening now, so you keep returning, gently, without force, to what's in front of you. Your breath, your surroundings, your actions, again and again. Because presence reduces noise. Naturally. Now here's something powerful. You don't need hours of practice. You need consistency, because a quiet mind is not built in intensity. It's built in repetition. Now pause for a moment. Imagine your day. Where can you create space? Where can you reduce noise? Where can you stop engaging? Small changes. That's all it takes. Now here's the deeper truth. You don't control your mind by force. You shape it by how you live, and the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Less effort, less struggle, more clarity, more calm. Now, if this is starting to click, if you're beginning to feel like this is something you can actually build, stay with this, because what you're about to understand next is the most important shift in this entire book, the one that changes everything. You are not your thoughts. Chapter 10. You are not your thoughts. This is the shift, the one that changes everything. Because up until now, it has felt like your thoughts are you. They show up, and you believe them. They say something, and you react. They repeat, and you feel trapped. But here's the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one aware of them. And that difference is everything. You've experienced this before. A thought appears, I'm not good enough, and instantly, it feels real. Like a fact. Like something that defines you. But pause for a moment. If you can notice that thought, who is doing the noticing? Because the thought is there, but something else is aware of it. That something is you, not the thought, the awareness behind it. Now here's where it gets powerful. If you're aware of a thought, it cannot be you, because you can observe it, and anything you can observe is separate from you. Now think about this. Your thoughts change constantly, moment to moment, day to day, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes calm, sometimes overwhelming. But you are still here, watching, experiencing, aware. So which one is you, the changing thoughts or the awareness that stays? That's the shift. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one hearing it. Now here's why this matters. Because when you believe every thought, you get pulled into every direction, every fear, every doubt, every what if. But when you see thoughts for what they are, just mental events, they lose their control, not because they disappear, but because you stop identifying with them. Now imagine this. Your mind says, what if something goes wrong? Before, you would follow it, analyze it, feel it. Now, you notice it, that's a thought, and you let it pass, not because you forced it away, but because you didn't become it. Now here's something important. This doesn't mean your thoughts stop. They won't. Your mind will still produce them, constantly, but your relationship with them changes, and that changes everything. Because now, you have space between you and what your mind is saying. And in that space, there is choice. Now pause for a moment. Think about a thought that usually pulls you in. Something repetitive, something heavy. Now instead of saying, this is true, say, I am noticing this thought. Just that. Notice what happens. Even slightly. That's separation. That's awareness. And that's where freedom begins. Now here's the deeper truth. Your mind is a storyteller. It creates narratives, scenarios, possibilities. Not all of them are real. Not all of them are useful, but they feel real when you believe them. And once you stop believing every story, the intensity fades, the pressure drops, the noise softens. Now here's the shift. You don't need to control your thoughts. You need to stop identifying with them. Because once you do, they lose their power over you. Not instantly, but consistently. And over time, this becomes natural. You notice thoughts without reacting to all of them. You feel emotions without being consumed by them. You experience your mind without being trapped inside it. Now imagine living like that. Thoughts still exist, but they don't control you. They pass like clouds in the background, while you remain clear, present, aware. That's the shift. And once you understand this, everything else becomes easier, because you stop fighting your mind. You stop fearing your thoughts. You stop trying to fix every feeling. And instead, you allow. You observe. You move forward. Now this leads us to the final step, where everything comes together, where you realize peace was never something you had to create. It was something you stopped blocking. Chapter 11. Peace begins when you stop believing every thought. You've been trying to quiet your mind for a long time, trying to fix it, control it, understand it, silence it, and for a while it felt like something was wrong, like your mind was the problem, like you were the problem. But now you see it differently. Your mind was never broken. It was just overactive, overprotective, trying to solve things that don't always need solving, trying to create certainty where certainty doesn't exist. And in doing that, it pulled you into loops, thought after thought, question after question, until you felt stuck, trapped, overwhelmed. But now, something has shifted. You understand. Thoughts are not instructions. They're not facts. They're not commands. They're just thoughts. They appear. They pass, unless you hold on to them. And that's where everything changes, because you've spent so much time believing every thought, following every idea, trying to resolve every possibility. But you don't have to. Not anymore. Now think about this. How many thoughts have you had that never came true? How many fears that never happened? How many worries that didn't matter later? Most of them. And yet, in the moment, they felt real, urgent, important, because you believed them. Now imagine something different. A thought appears. What if something goes wrong? But instead of reacting, you notice it, you let it exist, without chasing it, without solving it, without believing it, and then you return to your life. That's peace, not the absence of thoughts, but the absence of attachment. Now here's the truth. Your mind may never be completely quiet. There will still be noise, still be thoughts, still be moments of anxiety, but they won't control you. Because you understand them, you see them clearly, and that clarity creates freedom. Now here's what changes. You stop overreacting to thoughts. You stop trying to fix everything. You stop chasing certainty. You stop believing every story your mind creates. And instead, you observe, you allow. You move forward, not perfectly, but differently, more calmly, more clearly, more intentionally. Now pause for a moment. Think about how far you've come. From feeling trapped to understanding the pattern. From reacting to every thought, to seeing them for what they are. That's not small. That's a shift. And once you make that shift, you don't go back. Because now you know, you don't need to control your mind. You don't need to eliminate every thought. You don't need to figure everything out. You just need to stop believing everything your mind tells you. And that changes everything. Now here's the final truth. Peace is not something you create. It's something that's already there, underneath the noise. And every time you let a thought pass, step out of a loop, stop chasing certainty, return to the present, you uncover it again and again and again until it becomes natural, effortless, part of who you are. Now imagine living like that. Your mind still thinks, but it doesn't control you. Your thoughts still appear, but they don't trap you. Your anxiety still rises sometimes, but it doesn't stay, because you know how to move through it. That's not perfection, that's freedom. And once you experience that, even for a moment, you realize something powerful. You were never stuck. You were just caught in the habit of believing every thought. Now you're not. And from this point forward, everything feels different, quieter, lighter, clearer. Not because your mind changed overnight, but because your relationship with it did. And that is where peace begins. File hook next audiobook. But here's the part most people don't realize. Even when your mind becomes quieter, life doesn't stop. People still trigger you. Situations still challenge you. Emotions still rise. So the next question becomes, how do you stay calm when real life gets difficult? How do you respond without falling back into old patterns? How do you handle pressure without losing clarity? Because understanding your mind is only the first step. Learning how to navigate life with that awareness is where real transformation happens. In the next audiobook, you'll learn how to stay calm under pressure, how to handle difficult emotions without reacting, how to respond instead of overthinking, how to build emotional control in real-life situations. Step by step, practical, real. Because a quiet mind is powerful, but a calm life is where it truly matters. And that is where we're going next. This is only the beginning. But here's the part most people never fully understand. A quiet mind is not the end, it's the beginning. Because once the noise fades, you start to see things differently. You notice how often people react without thinking, how often emotions take control, how quickly situations spiral, not because of what happens, but because of how people respond. And then a new question appears, not, how do I stop overthinking? But, how do I stay calm when life isn't? Because real life doesn't pause. People still test you. Situations still challenge you. Pressure still shows up, and in those moments, awareness alone is not enough. You need control. Emotional control. Response control. The ability to stay steady when everything around you isn't. Because that's the next level. Not just a quiet mind, but a strong one. And that's exactly what we're building next. So if you're ready to go beyond overthinking and learn how to stay calm, clear, and in control, no matter what happens, then stay with this journey, because what comes next changes how you handle everything. And once you learn it, you don't just think differently, you live differently. This is where it truly begins.